Today, when I read Psalm chapter 25, verses 6 and 7, it gave me great comfort to know that God is faithful and to remember that God is faithful. It says this: "Remember, Lord, your compassion and your faithful love, for they have existed from antiquity. Do not remember the sin of my youth or my acts of rebellion in keeping with your faithful love. Remember me because of your goodness." These two verses should bring great comfort to us, because the first part talks about the consistency of God. He says He's been faithful from antiquity. In other words, He's been faithful for many, many years, since the beginning of time, since before the beginning of time, actually. God is consistent. God never changes. He's always been faithful. You know, in our human life, consistency, doing the same thing over and over, we might consider boring. But as a child of God, we should be comforted by God's consistency, because He is faithful. Notice the psalmist goes on to say, don't remember. He says, do remember me in your faithfulness, but don't remember my past sins, my mess-ups, my failures. You know, God is faithful. He says that if we confess our sins, it says He is faithful and just to forgive our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. And notice too, it's not about us, it's about Him. He says to not remember His sins and His rebellion. Why? Because of God's faithfulness, because of His goodness, because of who He is. You know, I have a poster that says, "I'm not getting old, I just can't remember stuff because my brain is full." That's not God. God never forgets. God always remembers. If He's made a promise, He's going to keep it. God remembers. God chooses not to remember our sins and our past failures. He doesn't just forget because He's getting old, because God never gets old. God is consistent. God is the same. I would encourage you today to think about this, to think about how consistent and how faithful God is, because that means you can trust Him. You can trust Him with anything and everything because of His